The first thing I remember is the cold, sticky linoleum pressing against my cheek, the taste of copper in my mouth, and the way the kitchen light flickered overhead, making the shadows dance on the ceiling. My phone was buzzing somewhere near my hand, but my fingers wouldn't close around it. I could hear my own breath, ragged and shallow, and the faint hum of the refrigerator, the only witness to my collapse. I tried to call out, but my voice was just a whisper, barely louder than the whir of the old ceiling fan. I'd dialed Joylene first, then Caleb, but both calls went to voicemail. I left a message for each, my words slurring together. "Mama just needs a little help, baby. Call me back." But the phone stayed silent, except for the low battery warning that blinked red, like a tiny useless heartbeat. I don't know how long I lay there, half in and half out of the world, but I remember the sound of footsteps on the porch, slow and steady, and the creak of the screen door. I thought maybe it was Joylene finally, or Caleb, come to check on me. But when the door swung open, it was Mr. Harmon's voice that filled the kitchen, deep and gentle, with a note of worry I'd never heard before. "Ora Mae? You in here?" I tried to answer, but all that came out was a soft moan. He found me on the floor, his big hands warm as he knelt beside me, the scent of aftershave and fresh-cut grass clinging to his flannel shirt. "Lord Ora Mae, what happened?" he asked, and I felt his hand on my forehead, cool and steady, like my mama used to do when I was a child. He didn't waste time. He called 911, his voice calm but urgent, spelling out my address, telling them I was breathing but not right, that I'd been alone. He stayed with me, talking soft, telling me to hold on, that help was coming. I could feel the warmth of his hand in mine, grounding me, keeping me from slipping away. I wanted to cry, not from pain, but from the shame of it all. How after all these years, after all the nights I'd worked 3 jobs to keep a roof over my children's heads, it was the neighbor they barely noticed who was here when I needed someone most. The paramedics came quick, their voices sharp and efficient, the smell of antiseptic filling the air as they lifted me onto the stretcher. I caught a glimpse of myself in the hallway mirror as they wheeled me out, hair wrapped in a faded scarf, pajamas wrinkled, face pale and drawn. I looked old, older than I felt inside, and for a moment, I wondered if my kids would even recognize me if they saw me like this. Mr. Harmon followed us out, his hand on my shoulder, promising to lock up the house and bring my things to the hospital. I tried to thank him, but the words got lost somewhere between my heart and my mouth. The ride to the hospital was a blur of sirens and flashing lights, the city sliding past in streaks of yellow and blue. I drifted in and out, memories bubbling up. Joylene as a little girl, her hair in tight braids, running to me after school. Caleb asleep on the couch, his head in my lap, the weight of his trust heavy and sweet. I remembered the nights I'd come home from the diner, feet aching, hands raw from scrubbing floors, and how I'd stand in the doorway just watching them breathe, promising myself it was all worth it, that they'd remember one day how hard I tried. But now, lying in a hospital, bed with wires taped to my chest and the steady beep of the heart monitor, filling the silence, I wondered if they remembered anything at all. The nurse came in, young and brisk, her hair pulled back in a tight bun. She checked my vitals, asked if I had family to call. I told her I'd left messages, but no one had answered yet. She gave me a look I'd seen before, pity mixed with impatience, and told me to rest. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep, but every time I drifted off, I saw Mr. Harmon's face, kind and worried, and I felt the sting of tears behind my eyelids. I thought about all the times I'd seen him on his porch, waving as I hurried past, always too busy to stop, too tired to chat. The kids never paid him any mind, barely nodded when he said hello. I'd told them to be polite, but they'd just roll their eyes, lost in their own worlds. Now he was the only one who'd noticed I was missing. The hours crawled by. The hospital room was cold, the sheets stiff and scratchy against my skin. I watched the sun rise through the narrow window, the light turning the walls a soft gold. Still no calls, no messages. I tried not to let the hurt settle in my bones. But it was there, heavy and familiar, like the ache in my chest. I thought about calling again, but pride kept my hand from reaching for the phone. I'd already asked once. I wasn't going to beg. A soft knock at the door startled me. I expected a nurse, but it was Mr. Harmon, holding a small bag and a bouquet of wildflowers he must have picked from his yard. He smiled, a little shy, and set the flowers on the table by my bed. "Brought you some things," he said, his voice low. "Figured you might want your robe and slippers. And I made you some tea the way you like it." I felt my throat tighten, the tears threatening again. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice barely there. He sat in the chair by my bed, not saying much, just keeping me company. The silence was comfortable, filled with the quiet understanding of two people who'd seen too much to need words. After a while, he cleared his throat. "You want me to try your kids again?" I shook my head, looking away. "They're busy," I said, the bitterness slipping out before I could stop it. "Always busy." He didn't argue, just nodded, his eyes soft with something like sorrow. "You know, Ora Mae, sometimes folks don't realize what they got till it's gone. But you ain't gone yet. You still here, and you still got people who care, even if they ain't the ones you expected." I let his words settle over me, warm and heavy, and for the first time since I'd fallen, I felt a little less alone. The nurse came in again, surprised to see Mr. Harmon sitting there. She asked if he was family, and he hesitated just a second before saying, "Yes, ma'am, I reckon I am." I smiled at that, a real smile, small but true. After she left, he leaned in, his voice low. "You rest now. I'll be here when you wake up." I closed my eyes, the sound of his voice wrapping around me like a blanket, and let myself drift. When I woke, the room was quiet, the afternoon sun slanting through the blinds. My phone was on the table, still silent. Mr. Harmon was gone, but the flowers were there, bright and wild, a splash of color in the sterile room. I reached for the phone, checked for messages. Nothing from Joylene, nothing from Caleb. Just a missed call from a number I didn't recognize, probably a bill collector or a wrong number. I set the phone down, the weight of disappointment settling in my chest. A nurse came in with my dinner, bland and unappetizing, but I ate it anyway, forcing each bite down. I thought about the years I'd spent making meals for my kids, sneaking extra meat onto their plates, going without so they'd have enough. I wondered if they ever thought about those nights, if they remembered the taste of my cooking, the warmth of our little kitchen, or if all of that had faded, replaced by the busyness of their own lives. The next morning, Mr. Harmon was back, this time with a crossword puzzle book and a thermos of hot tea. He sat with me, filling the silence with stories about his garden, the stray cat that kept trying to move in, the neighbors who never returned his tools. I listened, grateful for the distraction, for the simple kindness of his presence. He didn't ask for anything, didn't expect anything. He was just there. As the days passed, I started to feel stronger. The doctors said I'd had a mild heart attack brought on by stress and exhaustion. They told me to rest, to take it easy, to let someone else take care of things for a while. I laughed at that, a dry, bitter sound. I'd spent my whole life taking care of everyone else. I didn't know how to let go. On the third day, Joylene finally called. Her voice was rushed, distracted, full of apologies and excuses. "Sorry, Mama, work's been crazy. I meant to call, I really did. Caleb said he'd check on you, but you know how he is." I listened, the words washing over me, empty and familiar. I told her I was fine, that Mr. Harmon had been helping, that she didn't need to worry. She sounded relieved, almost grateful, and promised to visit soon. I didn't hold my breath. Caleb texted that night, a single line, "You good, Ma?" I stared at the screen, fingers hovering over the keys, then typed back, "I'm okay. Mr. Harmon's been here." He replied with a thumbs up, nothing more. I set the phone down, the ache in my chest sharper than before. Mr. Harmon came every day, bringing small comforts. A slice of pie, a new book, a fresh pair of socks. He talked about his late wife, about the years they'd spent together, the way she'd laugh at his bad jokes. I listened, letting his stories fill the empty spaces inside me. Sometimes he'd just sit in silence, holding my hand, his thumb tracing slow circles on my skin. It was more comfort than I'd had in years. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low and the room filled with golden light, I asked him why he'd help me. He looked at me, his eyes kind and steady. "Because you needed it," he said simply. "And because I know what it's like to be alone." I felt the tears come then, hot and silent, and he squeezed my hand, letting me cry without shame. That night, as I lay in the hospital bed, I thought about all the years I'd spent working, sacrificing, giving everything I had for my children. I thought about the nights I'd come home bone-tired, the mornings I'd woken before dawn, the birthdays and holidays I'd missed because I was too busy trying to keep us afloat. I wondered if any of it had mattered, if my kids would ever understand what it cost me. But as I drifted off to sleep, the memory of Mr. Harmon's hand in mine lingered. Warm and steady, a reminder that sometimes family isn't just blood. Sometimes it's the people who show up when you need them most. The ones who see you when you feel invisible. And for the first time in a long time, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, I deserve to be seen. I used to think exhaustion was just a part of being a mother. That bone-deep tired, the kind that settles in your joints and never quite leaves, was just the price you paid for loving your children enough. I remember the first time I worked a double shift at the hospital, my feet swollen in those cheap white sneakers, the smell of bleach clinging to my skin. I'd come home just as the sun was rising, the city still quiet, and I'd stand in the doorway for a moment, watching Joylene and Caleb curled up together on the old sofa, their faces soft with sleep. I'd tell myself, this is why you do it, Ora Mae. This is what matters. Back then, I was younger, stronger, or maybe just more stubborn. I'd change out of my scrubs, splash cold water on my face, and start breakfast before the kids woke up. Pancakes on payday, oatmeal when the money was tight. I'd hum to myself, some old gospel song my mama used to sing, and try to ignore the ache in my back. The kitchen was always cluttered, dishes piled in the sink, but it was ours. The sunlight would creep in through the window, catching the dust motes in the air, and for a few minutes I'd feel almost peaceful. But peace never lasted long. There was always another job to get to, another bill to pay. After the hospital, I'd change into my diner uniform. Pink polyester, name tag crooked, hair pulled back tight. The regulars would call me Miss Ora, and I'd smile, pouring coffee, pretending I wasn't counting the hours until I could go home. Sometimes I'd catch my reflection in the window, eyes ringed with fatigue, lips pressed thin. I'd think, just a little longer, just until the kids are grown. The third job was the hardest, cleaning offices downtown after dark. The city felt different at night, empty and echoing, the only sounds my own footsteps and the hum of the vacuum. I'd scrub toilets, wipe down desks, empty trash cans, all the while thinking about Joylene's science project or Caleb's new sneakers, the ones he'd begged for all summer. I'd tuck the extra cash into an envelope in the back of my closet, saving for Christmas, for emergencies, for the day when things might finally get easier. But easy never came. The years blurred together, one long stretch of work and worry. The kids grew up fast, too fast. Joylene started high school, got a job at the grocery store, and suddenly she was too busy for family dinners. Caleb spent more time at his friends' houses, coming home late, mumbling excuses. I tried to keep us close, tried to hold on, but it felt like sand slipping through my fingers. I remember one night Joylene came home after midnight, her eyes red, her voice sharp. "You don't get it, Mama, you're always working. You don't know what it's like." I wanted to tell her I was working for her, for both of them, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I just stood there, hands on my hips, watching her storm off to her room. The door slammed, rattling the pictures on the wall. I sat at the kitchen table, head in my hands, and wondered if I was doing any of it right. Caleb was quieter, always slipping away, headphones on, lost in his own world. He'd leave notes on the fridge. "Gone to school? At Marcus's house. Don't wait up." I'd try to catch him in the mornings, offer him breakfast, but he'd just grab a granola bar and mumble, "I'm late, Ma." I'd watch him go, backpack slung over one shoulder, and feel the distance growing, inch by inch, day by day. There were warning signs, little things I tried to ignore. Missed calls, unanswered texts, birthdays forgotten or remembered with a quick message, no time for a visit. I'd tell myself they were busy, that this was just how life was now. But every time I set the table for one, every time I came home to an empty house, the ache in my chest grew sharper. I started getting sick more often. Coughs that wouldn't go away, headaches that lingered for days. I'd brush it off, tell myself I was just tired, that I'd feel better after a good night's sleep. But sleep never came easy. I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the city outside, wondering if my kids ever thought about me, if they remembered the sound of my voice, the feel of my arms around them. One afternoon, I was cleaning out the hall closet when I found an old photo album, the cover worn soft from years of handling. I sat on the floor, flipping through the pages. Joylene's first day of kindergarten, Caleb's birthday party at the park, the three of us grinning in front of the Christmas tree. I traced their faces with my finger, remembering the way they used to cling to me, the way they'd beg for one more story before bed. I wondered when that changed, when I became just another obligation, another name in their phones. The loneliness crept in slow, like a draft under the door. I tried to fill the silence, watching TV, reading old magazines, baking bread I never finished. I'd call Joylene, leave messages, just checking in, baby. Let me know you're okay. Sometimes she'd call back. Her voice rushed, always on her way somewhere. Sorry, Mama, I'll come by soon. But soon never came. Caleb was worse. He'd text once a week, maybe. A quick, you good? Or need anything? I'd type out long replies, telling him about my day, the neighbor's new dog, the flowers blooming in the yard. But he'd just send a thumbs up or a heart emoji. I'd stare at the screen, wishing for more, but not knowing how to ask. I started seeing Mr. Harmon more often, usually on his porch, watering his plants or fixing something on his old truck. He'd wave, call out, "How you doing, Miss Ora?" I'd smile, tell him I was fine, always fine, even when I wasn't. Sometimes he'd bring over tomatoes from his garden, or a slice of pie his niece had baked. I'd thank him, promise to return the favor, but I never did. I was too proud, too stubborn to admit I needed help. The day I collapsed, I'd been feeling off for weeks, dizzy, short of breath, a tightness in my chest that wouldn't go away. I told myself it was just stress, that I'd be fine if I could just get some rest. But rest was a luxury I couldn't afford. There was always something that needed doing, always someone who needed me. Lying in that hospital bed, I replayed every moment, every sacrifice. Every time I'd put myself last, I wondered if it had all been for nothing. If my kids would ever understand what I'd given up for them. The nurse came in, checked my chart, asked if I wanted to call anyone. I shook my head, too tired to explain. That night, as the hospital quieted and the city lights flickered outside my window, I made a decision. I wasn't going to beg anymore. I wasn't going to chase after people who didn't want to be caught. I'd spent my whole life giving, and now, when I needed someone, it was the neighbor they ignored who showed up first. That truth stung, but it also set something free inside me, a small, stubborn spark of dignity I thought I'd lost. The next morning, Joylene finally appeared, her hair pulled back, dark circles under her eyes. She stood in the doorway, clutching her purse, looking everywhere but at me. "Hey, Mama," she said, her voice thin. "Sorry I'm late. Work's been crazy." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. She sat by the bed, scrolling through her phone, making small talk about her job, her apartment, the weather. I listened, nodding in the right places, but my heart wasn't in it. After a while, she looked up, her eyes shiny. "You should have called me sooner," she said, accusation hidden in her tone. I wanted to laugh, to tell her I had called, that I'd left messages, that I'd waited and waited. But I just smiled, the way mothers do, and said, "It's okay, baby. I'm glad you're here now." Caleb came later, shuffling in with his hands in his pockets, eyes on the floor. He mumbled a greeting, sat in the corner, headphones around his neck. He didn't say much, just stared at the wall, tapping his foot. I watched him, remembering the little boy who used to beg for piggyback rides, who'd cry when I left for work. Now he was a stranger, grown and distant, and I didn't know how to reach him. Mr. Harmon stopped by that afternoon, bringing a bag of groceries and a crossword puzzle book. He greeted Joylene and Caleb, his voice warm but firm. "Good to see y'all. Your mama's been through a lot. She needs rest, and she needs her family." Joylene bristled, her lips pressed tight. Caleb just nodded, not meeting his eyes. After Mr. Harmon left, Joylene turned to me, her voice sharp. "Why's he always around, Mama? You barely know him." I looked at her, really looked, and saw the fear behind her anger. "He's been a good neighbor," I said quietly. "He's helped me when I needed it." She didn't reply, just stared at her phone, her fingers moving fast. That night, after they'd both gone, I lay in the dark, listening to the hum of the machines, the distant sounds of nurses in the hallway. I thought about all the years I'd spent trying to be everything for everyone, and how, in the end, it was the kindness of a neighbor that saved me. I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief, a letting go of old expectations, a quiet acceptance of what was. As I drifted off to sleep, I promised myself that things would be different. I wouldn't beg for love, wouldn't chase after people who couldn't see me. I'd take care of myself, the way I'd always taken care of everyone else. And maybe, just maybe, I'd let myself accept help when it was offered, even if it came from the most unexpected places. The hospital room was quiet except for the steady beep of the monitor and the soft shuffle of nurses' shoes in the hallway. I watched the sunlight crawl across the wall, thinking about how strange it was to be still, to have nothing to do but wait. I'd spent my whole life in motion, working, cleaning, worrying, loving. Now I was stuck in this bed, my body weak, my mind racing with questions I didn't want to answer. Joylene came by again, this time with a bag of groceries she'd picked up on her way. She set them on the chair, barely glancing at me. "I got you some fruit?" "Mama, doctor said you need to eat better." Her voice was flat, tired. She scrolled through her phone, answering emails, her thumb moving fast. I watched her, remembering the little girl who used to beg for bedtime stories, who'd cry if I left the room before she fell asleep. Now she was a woman with her own life, her own worries, and I was just another item on her to-do list. Caleb showed up later, headphones around his neck, eyes red from lack of sleep or maybe something else. He sat at the foot of the bed, tapping his foot, glancing at the clock every few minutes. "You need anything, Ma?" he asked, not meeting my eyes. I shook my head, too tired to pretend. He nodded, relief flickering across his face, and went back to scrolling through his phone. I wanted to ask them why they hadn't come sooner, why it took a neighbor's call to bring them here. But the words stuck in my throat, heavy and bitter. Instead, I just listened to the silence, the space between us filled with things unsaid. That evening, Mr. Harmon came by, carrying a small vase of fresh flowers from his garden. He set them on the windowsill, brightening the room with their color. "How you feeling, Ora Mae?" he asked, his voice gentle. I managed to smile, grateful for his presence. He sat by my bed, telling me about his day, the stray cat that had finally let him pet her, the tomatoes ripening on the vine. His stories were simple, but they filled the room with warmth. Joylene watched him, suspicion in her eyes. "You sure do spend a lot of time here, Mr. Harmon," she said, her tone sharp. He just smiled, unbothered. "Your mama's good company, and she's done plenty for this neighborhood, even if folks don't always notice." Joylene looked away, her jaw tight. The next morning, a nurse came in with a clipboard, her expression serious. "We need to talk about your discharge plan, Ms. Ora Mae. Do you have someone at home who can help you?" I hesitated, glancing at Joylene and Caleb. They both looked uncomfortable, shifting in their seats. "We'll figure something out," Joylene said quickly, but her eyes darted to her phone, already calculating how much time she could spare. After the nurse left, Mr. Harmon leaned in, his voice low. "You know, you don't have to do this alone. I can help if you'll let me." I felt a lump in my throat, the old pride rising up, but I swallowed it down. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice trembling. Later that day, as the sun dipped low and the room filled with golden light, Joylene and Caleb started arguing in the hallway. Their voices were muffled, but I could hear the frustration, the blame. "You should have called her more," Joylene snapped. "You live closer," Caleb shot back. "You're the oldest. You're supposed to handle this stuff." Their words stung, each one a reminder of how far we'd drifted. Mr. Harmon stayed by my side, his presence steady and calm. He brought me tea, helped me sit up, made sure I took my medicine. He didn't ask for anything, didn't expect gratitude. He just showed up day after day, filling the empty spaces my children left behind. One afternoon, as I was dozing, I heard raised voices outside my door. Joylene and Caleb had come back, this time with questions. "Mama, why didn't you tell us you were this sick?" Joylene demanded, her eyes flashing. We could have helped. I looked at her, tired and sad. I did call. I left messages, but nobody answered. Caleb shifted, guilt flickering across his face. I was busy, Ma. I'm sorry. Before I could reply, Mr. Harmon stepped in, his voice gentle but firm. Your mama's been struggling for a while. I've been checking in, bringing groceries, making sure she's okay. She didn't want to worry y'all, but she needed help. Joylene bristled, her pride wounded. We're her family. We should have been the ones to help. Mr. Harmon nodded. Then be here now. She needs you. The room was thick with tension, the air heavy with regret. I felt tears prick my eyes, but I blinked them away. I'm tired, I said softly. I just want to go home. Joylene and Caleb looked at each other, uncertainty in their eyes. For the first time, I saw fear there, fear of losing me, fear of what that would mean. That night, as the hospital quieted and the city lights flickered outside, I lay awake, thinking about everything that had happened. I thought about the years I'd spent working, sacrificing, loving. I thought about the loneliness, the disappointment, the small moments of joy. And I thought about Mr. Harmon, the neighbor my children had ignored, who had become my lifeline. The next morning, the doctor came in with good news. You're strong, Ms. Ora Mae. With some rest and help at home, you'll be just fine. I smiled, relief flooding through me. Joylene and Caleb promised to help, but I could see the doubt in their eyes, the uncertainty. Mr. Harmon squeezed my hand, his eyes warm. We'll get you through this, Ora Mae, one day at a time. As I was wheeled out of the hospital, the sun was shining, the air fresh and clean. Mr. Harmon walked beside me, steady and sure. Joylene and Caleb followed, their faces uncertain, but for the first time I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe things could change. Maybe we could find our way back to each other. Or maybe, just maybe, I'd learn to lean on the people who showed up, even if they weren't the ones I expected. The ride home from the hospital was quiet, the kind of quiet that settles in your bones and makes you notice every little thing. The way the sun flickered through the car window, the soft hum of the engine, the way Joylene's hands gripped the steering wheel just a little too tight. Caleb sat in the back, headphones on, staring out the window, lost in his own world. Mr. Harmon followed behind in his old pickup, a bag of groceries and my favorite blanket on the seat beside him. When we pulled up to the house, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. The porch steps creaked under my weight, the screen door squeaked just like always, and the living room smelled faintly of lemon polish and something older, something like memory. Joylene helped me inside, her movements careful but distant, as if she was afraid I might break. Caleb hovered in the doorway, shifting from foot to foot, not sure where to put himself. Mr. Harmon came in last, setting the groceries on the counter and draping my blanket over the back of the sofa. You need anything, Ora Mae? You just holler, he said, his voice warm and steady. I nodded, too tired to say much, but grateful for the comfort of his presence. The first few days at home were a blur of pills and doctor's orders, of Joylene fussing over my meals and Caleb running errands, both of them trying to make up for lost time in their own awkward ways. But the truth was, the house felt emptier than ever. The kids were there, but their minds were somewhere else, Joylene on her phone, answering work emails, Caleb slipping out for hours at a time, always with a promise to be right back. It was Mr. Harmon who filled the silence. He came by every morning, sometimes with fresh bread or a thermos of tea, sometimes just to sit with me on the porch and watch the world go by. He'd tell me stories about his late wife, about the years he spent working at the plant, about the neighbors who came and went. His voice was a balm, soothing the ache of loneliness I'd carried for so long. One afternoon, as we sat on the porch, the sun warm on our faces, he turned to me and said, You know, Ora Mae, you don't have to do everything alone. It's okay to let people help. I looked at him, really looked, and saw the kindness in his eyes, the patience, the understanding. For a moment, I let myself believe him. That evening, Joylene and Caleb sat me down in the living room, their faces serious. Mama, we want to help, Joylene said, her voice trembling just a little. We know we haven't been around like we should. We're sorry. Caleb nodded, his eyes shining with guilt. We'll do better, Ma. Promise. I listened, my heart aching with a mix of hope and skepticism. I wanted to believe them, wanted to trust that things could change. But I'd learned the hard way that words were easy, that real change took more than promises. Still, I nodded, letting them see a glimmer of forgiveness in my eyes. We'll see, I said softly. One day at a time. The days passed, slow and gentle. I started to feel stronger, my body healing, my spirit lifting just a little. I spent more time on the porch, watching the world with Mr. Harmon, letting his stories fill the empty spaces inside me. Sometimes Joylene would join us, her laughter tentative but real. Caleb would bring me flowers from the yard, awkward but sincere. One morning, I woke to the sound of birds singing outside my window, the air fresh and sweet. I got up, wrapped myself in my favorite cardigan, and made a cup of tea. As I sat at the kitchen table, sunlight streaming in, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not the kind that comes from everything being perfect, but the kind that comes from knowing you're not alone. Later that week, Mr. Harmon invited me to a community meeting at the church. Just some folks getting together, talking, sharing stories, he said. I hesitated, my old shyness rising up, but he smiled, gentle and encouraging. You might like it, Ora Mae. You got stories worth sharing. So I went, letting him walk me down the block, his arm steady under mine. The church basement was warm and bright, filled with the hum of conversation and the smell of coffee. I saw faces I recognized, neighbors I'd waved to but never really known. They welcomed me, asked about my health, listened as I told them about my kids, about Mr. Harmon, about the kindness that had saved me when I needed it most. For the first time in years, I felt seen, not just as someone's mother or someone's patient, but as myself. After the meeting, as we walked home under the streetlights, Mr. Harmon squeezed my hand. You did good, Ora Mae, real good. I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in months. Back at home, Joylene was waiting up, a cup of tea in her hands. She looked at me, her eyes soft. I'm glad you went, Mama. You deserve to have a life, too. I sat beside her, the two of us sipping tea in comfortable silence. Caleb came in later, dropping his backpack by the door, and for a moment, it felt like we were a family again, not perfect, not whole, but trying. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself looking forward to the little things. Morning tea on the porch, laughter in the kitchen, the sound of Mr. Harmon's voice drifting through the open window. I started a small garden in the backyard, planting tomatoes and herbs, letting my hands find purpose in the soil. Joylene helped, her laughter ringing out as we got our hands dirty. Caleb built a little bench for me, his gift quiet, but full of love. One evening, as the sun set and the sky turned gold, I sat on the porch with Mr. Harmon, watching the world slow down. He looked at me, his eyes gentle. You're stronger than you know, Ora Mae. Don't let anyone make you feel small. I smiled, feeling the truth of his words settle in my heart. I realized then that family isn't just blood. It's the people who show up, who see you, who hold your hand when you're too tired to stand. It's the neighbor who brings you tea, the daughter who learns to listen, the son who builds you a bench. It's the community that welcomes you, the friends who become family. As the stars came out, I closed my eyes and breathed in the night air, grateful for the second chance I'd been given. I knew there would be hard days ahead, moments of doubt and loneliness, but I also knew I wasn't alone. I had people who cared, people who saw me, people who loved me in their own imperfect ways. If you're still with me, you're going to want to hear this part. And hey, subscribe if true stories move you. Because sometimes, the people you least expect are the ones who show up when it matters most. And sometimes, the hardest thing is learning to let them in.